warming up for the opening game.
Yeah.
All right. The Derrick White, Jaylen Brown combo block on PJ Washington to seal the game.
With a little push in the back. That Luka over the head pass that like floated in the air for about 15 seconds.
The non-Luka Mavs 3-point production. All right, let's do a podcast. Tweet us out first, though. That's too hard. I'll do it later. Like open up the studio. I should probably still do it. It's boring. This is great radio here. But yeah,
we're always great radio, Nate.
You have to go into like the actual YouTube. StreamYard should actually have a link to just like send out on some that you've just gone live on social media, but they don't. At least maybe they do, and I just never found it. And there's also the fact that my tweet deck is really slow typing because I have so many columns, and also just TweetDeck is like a bad web page right now. So I can only type tweets at a fast enough speed in regular Twitter, but then TweetDeck is what I use to actually read, so I have to open it different. Anyway.
Life is pain.
Thank you, Prince Humperdinck. That is an amazing observation right there. All right, here we go. Serious. All right, welcome on to our Game 2 breakdown here on Dunked On. I want to remind everyone that we are running a free trial at the moment leading up to the mock off season, which will be in earlier this year. We'll reveal exactly when that's going to be in a bit, but highly recommend if you want to give everything that we have on Dunked On a shot, including all of Dan's daily emails. He's writing pretty extensively every day. You get access to our cap sheets, free agent rankings, and list of eligible veteran extensions, and of course, Danny and me, and every Hollinger and Duncan 6 podcasts per week, sometimes more. So please, if you haven't yet, give that a shot via a free trial. Let's get rolling here, though, and I think the biggest takeaway for me, obviously 2-0 is 2-0. The stats on that are something like 94% overall for the team that's ahead, probably less so in a series like the finals where it's supposed to be more competitive. There are a million, 1-8 series where the home team goes up 2-0 and the A seed is not going to come back on them. But in terms of ostensibly evenly matched teams, still a commanding lead. But even more so than that, I would say for Dallas, that's demoralizing. And I want to see if you agree with me here. I think that for them to consistently win games in this series, maybe they can get one or two, if the shooting luck goes their way or whatever. Like things can get better for them in some ways. But for them to win, as you like to say, 4 out of the next 5 games, something fundamental about this series would need to change. Do you agree with me on that?
I do. And that is kind of my big broad scale concern for the Dallas Mavericks, is that they didn't have a disaster quarter like the first in game 1 at any point in time. They had some rough stretches, but overall there weren't nearly as many big Boston runs as there were in game 1. Boston did not hit the three-pointer at a ridiculous rate, though, of course, Dallas didn't either. Both these teams shot below 26% from long range. And Luka, in the first stretch of the game in particular, was unbelievable. He had 20 points in the first, let's say, 15 minutes or so of this contest. After that was more pedestrian. And that's not to say that everything went right for the Dallas Mavericks, just like everything didn't go right or wrong for the Boston Celtics. But this to me felt more like a normal version of a game between these two teams. And Dallas could have won this game, but Boston still, to me, had the run of play. They were the better team and they won.
Yeah, I think that's right. And 10 of 39 from three for Boston. Dallas only gets up 26 threes after we thought that 27 was a paltry number for them. They weren't quite as high in the number of threes they were taking after the deadline, but they still took a lot of them. They still generate a lot of them. They still generate a lot of corner threes, and they just weren't able to get enough up. And that's a big problem. Luka did have more assists. A lot of those were to guys closer to the rim. I think they also probably gave him some assists on some of these PJ Washington drive a closeout to a floater type of plays, and Washington was reasonably effective with that, although he was not effective from three, as every single non-Luka Mav was not. But I don't think Kyrie Irving is necessarily going to be that productive in the series. I thought actually he had better looks to me in game one than he had in this game. He made 4 of his first 5, mostly getting to the basket. A lot of that with Porzingis out of the game. And he finished 7 of 18 for the game. And he only had 16 points. He's not a big foul drawer, which is a little bit of a problem. And Luka, you mentioned, started amazingly well. Wasn't able to quite keep that up in terms of generating the shots. And they were able to get some stuff out of Gafford and Jones, but that's all from 2-point range, right? And you look at the stat again, the non-Luka Mavs, Kyrie got even fewer threes than he did in game one when he was 0 for 5 and had some pretty good looks. The non-Luka Mavs equaled their atrocious output from three that they had in game one, making only 2 3-pointers for the entire game as they go 6 out of 26. And I thought Luka should come out more aggressive. He did. He wasn't able to fully sustain it. Boston changed up their coverage a little bit, and maybe again it's the knee. Maybe it's that they're going at him on every possession, which we can talk more about. But they'll do better in the effort categories as well. But Boston has more depth than them to give more effort. It really looks like it's going to be a very tough nut to crack for this Dallas offense, even with 2 awesome offensive players in Luka and Kyrie.
Especially if Kyrie Irving doesn't play like the offensive player he is. And I thought that one of the big stories of game 2 was just how bad he was. And so that 4 or 5 in the beginning of the game, sure. Rest of contest, he was 3 of 13 from the field. But I thought, especially in that second quarter, he gets into foul trouble and just is awful defense in the early second allows Boston to get some.
And he's been good in these playoffs. They clearly,
Yes.
I don't know if it was fatigue or just being worried about getting a third foul.
Yeah, and I mean, he ended up with 3. He got I can't remember exactly when he got started. I think it was in the early third quarter. And just giving up blow-bys, not active in help defense. There was the play where which was more justified, where he took a step in on a Jaylen Brown. I think it was Jaylen Brown cut rather than drive, and then just a wide open 3 in the corner for Derrick White. And Irving hasn't been picked on in these playoffs, in part because he's been better. But I thought there were some moments where he was a real weak point for them on both ends of the floor. And that's 7 of 18. Some of those will look better. There were a few that normally go in. He didn't have as many of the weird turnovers. He had 2 total in this contest and had 6 assists. But Irving, he wasn't dominant. It wasn't. And one of the things that the Celtics benefit from with their defenders, and you got this really right at the beginning of the series in the preview with Jrue Holiday, is that Kyrie Irving doesn't really draw that much help. So there are times where he's, maybe he's creating a shot that'll go in. So maybe he goes 10, 11 out of 18 instead of going 7 out of 18, but he's not generating the looks for PJ, the looks for Derrick Jones Jr., the looks for Exum or Green that he has at other points of these playoffs, because the Celtics don't see a Kyrie Irving attack as a panic situation because they have better defenders and a better scheme.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the game that I expect from Kyrie going forward is much better than 7-18. And when he goes one-on-one against the guy who's guarding him, like that's usually White, who I think has done a pretty good job on him, and then Jrue, who's done a fantastic job. If he tries to go one-on-one against Jrue Holiday, he's like not even going to get a shot off half the time.
Yeah, had a
And
big one of those in the fourth quarter of this one.
yeah, and everyone else is doing a very good job of forcing him left, but because there's so much help, he can't get all the way to the rim for that lefty floater. We talked about how that's such a good shot for him. He's not nearly as good. I mean, he can make it, but he was missing these, a lot of them actually left, going left, but he wants to get all the way, take one more dribble and shoot that floater off of 1 foot with his left hand. He can't get to that point because the help is there, either the guard standing at the nail, which Boston's done an amazing job of helping like that off of the Mavs non-shooters, or if it's Porzingis in the game, it's the center, and so he's got to kind of pull up no closer than the elbow going left, and that's not the exact shot that he wants to take. I mean, it's there, that's what's being given to him. He can make it, but that's probably the worst shot in his arsenal. His counter going left is more the lefty floater. And yeah, I mean, he's not getting a situation where he's going to draw a ton of help in transition, where he's had a lot of advantages, not only just attacking before the defense is ready, but also getting a cross match. Well, everyone on Boston can kind of handle him in a one-on-one matchup, right? Like, there isn't a situation, unless it's Porzingis, where you're like, oh man, we gotta like overhelp here on him. And so Boston is really having their cake and eating it too. They almost never are putting two on the balls. Goes for Luka as well. They kind of changed things up a little bit there, and Luka had one turnover, but also got him on a couple of quick hitters out of those plays. But Boston's having their cake and eating it too by forcing guys to go one-on-one, but also not giving up stuff at the rim. Really, they have enough help in the lane, either at the nail or at the basket when it's Porzingis, that they are very rarely giving up shots at the basket to Luka and Kyrie. And so if you're going one-on-one all the time and you're shooting a jumper, and this Boston offense shot it extremely poorly, but I thought their process was pretty good through most of the game. Like, I just don't think they're going to be able to keep up with these guys.
I wanted to pull the stats on this because it's a great point that you brought up. So worth acknowledging, Irving and Doncic combined for 10 attempted free throws. I was going to say 10 made, but no, they made 6 of those 10 because Luka missed 4. But here's their shot chart. So those two players took 39 shots in this game. 5 of those were in the restricted area. 10 of those were upper paint. 12 of those were mid-range. 1 corner 3, which was made, and then 3 of 11 above the ring. And even if you have great tough shot makers, and Luka, that one-legged Dirk fade, he drilled a number of those, some cleaner looks than others in this game. It's hard to have a great offense, and a great offense is typically what it's going to take to beat the Celtics. It's hard to have a great offense when those are the shots you're generating. And Dallas, overall in the game, they took 24 free throws. They actually took more than Boston after a first quarter that I want to discuss. But they it is really tough sledding. And the other part of that story, and this parallels what we discussed after game 1, is the question that we disagreed on this of, are you more concerned about Dallas's offense or Dallas's defense? Is the idea that Dallas's offense has to be better because there is let's call it a ceiling, a reasonable ceiling on their defense defending the Celtics. And we really saw this. I thought you saw it at the first quarter was a little bit flawed, but then Boston, they did a couple really interesting things, particularly in the second quarter. And then they had another jolt in the third, where their offensive process seemed a lot better. They understood, get the matchup early, get downhill with the big man not around the basket. And whether it's Jrue Holiday or Derrick White in kind of equivalent of the dunker spot, or a corner 3 or something else, like Boston's offensive process to me in this game was significantly better, even if the shots didn't go in from 3 at the same rate.
Yeah, and there are a couple of points where Tatum and Brown probably got a little mid-range happy and should have found guys, but like they passed the ball well enough. Like Jaylen Brown threw one of the best passes at the end of the clock that I've seen him throw when he was in the air, pell-mell towards the basket and threw it back over his head to a shooter up top. That's one of the hardest passes to throw, is against your momentum 180 degrees like that, particularly because you got to know where the guy is, where you're obviously not looking originally. So yeah, I think Tatum didn't shoot it very well. He missed 4 layups. He was 1 of 7 from 3. He probably took, I would say, 4 or 5 shots that I would consider bad shots in this game, but he also missed some layups that weren't contested by the center, and he should make those against anybody who's not the center on Dallas, and even against Luka a couple of times. So I think he can play better, but he did pass the ball exceedingly well. He had 12 assists in this game. Bron had 7 assists. Like that's probably close to, I wonder if that's like close to the most they've ever had combined assists in a game between those guys to have 19. And especially when you consider that they shot so poorly, they only made 10 threes. Like they probably should have had more than they did. And Boston, I mean, again, when they shot so poorly, to have 29 assists, that shows you just a lot of health of the offense. They're able to set up Holiday around the basket. They got a number of good cuts as well. I mean, we'll talk more about Jrue's game, but he was fantastic on both ends. And so, yeah, I mean, I think this was a game in which Boston's offensive rebounding was really important in the first half when they were down a little bit. But yeah, I can Dallas play a little bit better? I thought they guarded a little bit better individually, and I think they can still kind of clean that up to not just like turn sideways and like Daniel Gafford did and like let Jayson Tatum blow by him. But I'm not sure how much better defensively Dallas is going to be able to get. And I was completely wrong, apparently, about their offense having a pretty high floor. Maybe not a huge ceiling, but a decent floor because of Luka and maybe to a lesser extent Kyrie. And so that's when we talked about the offense and we were more worried about the offense than the defense. I was kind of, I can't even remember what did I say about that.
Oh, it was a lifetime. I think
now I'm more worried about their I think they defended well enough to win, but I'm more worried about their defense because I'm so worried about their offense. Does that make any sense? It's tough.
Yeah, and I mean, I think then a logical place that we can go to from that is Jrue Holiday, because Holiday, I mean, the offensive stats pop were, ridiculous. 11 of 14 from the field, 26 points on 15 shooting possessions, also had 0 turnovers, 2 of 4 from 3, 9 of 10 from 2, including a lot around the basket. When you look at Jrue Holiday's shot chart, 8 of 8 in the restricted area, 1 for 1 upper paint, 0 for 1 mid-range. That is Morey ball to the extreme, except that he did get to the free throw line only 2 times. And you combine that with phenomenal defense overall, and Jrue Holiday doesn't need to be the engine offensively on this team. Just like at most times he wasn't the engine for the Bucks offensively. When he was the engine for the Bucks offensively in the title year, it actually went pretty poorly. But he does everything else so well. And to me, he's also a markedly better shooter than now. And he does all the little things incredibly well. And so understanding when to help, where to help, when to put his hand in. He did get called for a couple of reaches in this game. When to cut. He had one where we thought he cut too late, but then he ended up getting the layup with 1 second left in the shot clock. And that makes life easier on Tatum and Brown, not in the way that you and I expected. With back when they had Kyrie, back when they had Kemba Walker. That's how you make life easier. Jrue Holiday doesn't do those things. He does other things and really helps the Celtics create a margin for error.
Brilliant game by him, whether it was cutting, finding space in the dunker area, getting to loose balls, offensive rebounds. You mentioned knowing where to help. I mean, if he gets switched off of Luka or Kyrie, which of course they're doing a fair amount of, then he's just going to hang out right at the nail. And especially if the guy that he's switched onto is above that's a Washington, or it's Jones, or it's Josh Green, who really struggled in this game. Kleba, who really struggled in this game. He had a few moments as a help defender defensively. So Dallas, I mean, that's part of their problems. They're running out of players too, right? That's something that you're really concerned about. But yeah, Holiday was amazing. He had a play that will kind of be forgotten, I think, where Dallas has a chance to cut it to 6, and then Boston misses. I think this was even, they had like it might have even been a turnover, and PJ Washington is bringing the ball up. They tried to give it to him or Jones to like relieve some of the pressure on Luke and Kyrie to bring it up all the time. And so Jrue Holiday, Boston did a lot of this, was like, no, I'm going to just pressure you. Even though it's off a miss, I'm going to pressure you in the backcourt, PJ Washington, and you can't dribble against me. So he forces him to pick the ball up. He's kind of stuck. It looks like it's going to get knocked away. And then he throws this pass in the front court, and White actually gets the interception. And then they get transition to push it back up to 10. And that was to me maybe, or maybe they even got a 3 after. Yeah, that's what pushed them up by 11.
Jrue Holiday hit the 3 and waved goodbye.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's right. So that was probably the key play of the game to the extent that there was one in this. Obviously, there's White and Brown's block late too.
Mm-hmm.
So he was awesome. Like he's, and we were asked about so many times this year, Danny, of, oh, well, should we worry about Holiday a little bit? Like his usage is down by 10%, and he's not actually even shooting that well from 2. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander just like, beat him up in this game at OKC. And he has been awesome in this one. He had to play on Nembhard, the play of the series in Game 3 against the Pacers. And he scored well enough. Like, you certainly have to guard him, right? Like, he's been a very good offensive player for them. He's been very efficient in the playoffs, and he's just been bulletproof for them in this series.
I wanted to update you. I did a little bit. I didn't do the full dig because it's hard to search for combined stats on Basketball Reference. The closest, so it does appear from a cursory look that this is the most combined assists for Tatum and Brown in a game. And the game that is the closest to it is a memorable one and a funny one. Game 1 of the 22 finals. They had 18 combined assists. That was a 120-108 Celtics victory over the Warriors at Chase Center. And so this was 19. That was 18. That's the most I was able to find.
Okay. It's always good when I see that number. I'm like, man, that seems like a lot for them. Sometimes I'm wrong.
It is a lot. and I think, so we talked about Jrue Holiday and his amazing play on offense and defense. And we could just transition into the other guard they have that is one hell of a defender, and that's Derrick White. And White, not as good of a one-on-one defender, and this is not a Derrick White one-on-one defensive series because Kyrie Irving.
Oh, he's been good on Kyrie, though. I would say
he's been good.
One thing he actually has been good at too is not getting screened off. We'll talk some more about as we kind of go through these players, but we'll talk at some point more about some of the strategic stuff that was interesting from this one, and some of the stuff Dallas tried to do to open up the defense. But yeah, I mean, like he's been. I think like I'm fine with him guarding Kyrie.
Yeah, but he's been worse than Jrue. I mean, like it's a high. I think he's done well, and relative to how other teams have defended Kyrie Irving, then I mean he deserves praise on that. And he had like it's not like he's been the reason, but I haven't been blown away by what Derrick White has done in that. But I have been, as is basically always the case, as his help defense, his transition defense has been phenomenal. I mean, he had I don't know if he was credited. Let me look. Who was credited with the block on that PJ Washington play at the end? But it was White that was credited. So his 2 blocks were both of the highlight variety. The first one was in the first half where he went up. I can't remember exactly who was on. I think it might have been Derrick Jones Jr. He went up and jumped early and just hung in the air, and then just swung on his way down and got that block, which was ridiculous. Had a couple other big transition defense possessions, and then is a part of the huge block. And so there was a little bit of a push on PJ Washington's fast break that effectively sealed the game.
Yeah, how quickly it gets off the ground is insane. If you're just next time you see one of these blocks of his, particularly in slow motion, he gets off the ground so fast that he can jump second and still be higher than a guy who's taller than him at the summit. That's pretty remarkable. So like just take a look at how quickly he can react to get off the ground on some of these plays that he also had like an amazing verticality play on Luka in transition where Luka had to kick it out. They ended up not scoring on that possession. Yeah, so White was really good. Talk a little bit more about Doncic, and one thing that maybe I should have predicted a little bit better, but didn't, was that Horford actually would be pretty good on him. And, Gobert was too slow, obviously, right? Like, Gobert, you can kind of get him going one way, go back the other. He's still pretty good as a switch defender, but Luka was able to get pretty good separation. I mean, we've seen Horford really cause problems for Luka. Again, with this great help regime behind him, but they've really stopped hunting Horford. Remember, Horford blocked his step back going right in the first game. And so, like, because his feet aren't really like much slower than Luka's, but he is big enough. He's strong enough to not just get knocked backwards. That's always a really important thing against Luka, right? Like the biggest way Jaden McDaniels struggled, for example. And so Horford actually has been pretty effective. Like, Boston is very comfortable in that matchup on Luka. He really has not gotten much at all.
And so instead, one of the big stories in the early part of this game was the Celtic in the starting five who
Sorry, I did have a little more on Luka.
Oh, sorry.
I should have not stopped talking. Doncic did miss a bunch of free throws. He was 4 for 8 there. He had some pretty atrocious turnovers that ended up with 8, and those seemed to multiply as the game went on. He had a couple of plays where I think just due to fatigue or frustration, or I think he was getting fouled or whatever, you never see this from him. He just threw passes that were like, well, I hope it's going to work, right? Like, he usually knows that it's going to work when he throws these like crazy over the head passes. And he had some brilliant ones, right? Like, he had more assists, at least in this game, with 11. He I don't know what, 11 tupled his assists from game 1. But I think that, like, he had these 2 plays where he's just sort of like trapped at the box along the right baseline and like just throws it over his head, like either airmail or falling down or just like blooped up in the air. They just had no chance of completing. That I think just mentally he's like, well, I'm stuck here. I got to just, like, okay, I think someone's there. I'm Luka. It's going to work. And like, no, like that's, so I think the mental fatigue is catching up to him some. And then on defense, they went after him probably, I would say in this game, maybe even more than the last game. They went after him more than I think I've seen any team do, maybe since like that game 2 by the Suns back in 2022. And he was better than he was in that game. Like, it wasn't a complete disaster, but they're largely getting by him. And once more, guys can go to multiple moves against. There's one play where Jayson Tatum starts going right, then he goes back left, doesn't beat him, and then finally he's able to go between his legs again to go back right. And like, it's not like he's doing this all in one place, right? Like, usually there isn't enough space on the floor to do that. But like, guys could just start going laterally, and eventually Luka's going to kind of run out of slides, and the guy can turn the corner on him. He's just not fast enough, no matter how hard he tries. If they have that amount of space to work with, and I mean, if they, someone with access to second spectrum will probably be able to tell us this, but I think they went after him in pick and roll like at least 30 times tonight. Would you agree with that?
It was a lot.
Seems like that is a very high number.
I remember there was a stretch where they were going after Kyrie pretty aggressively, but overall, yeah, it was Luka. And I want to kind of tie the other 2 things, what I was setting up, and then one other thing with Luka. Yeah. I'll echo everything you said. So one of those was, for me, the most notable tactical wrinkle in the early part of the game was Jason Kidd deciding the Celtic in the starting 5 that we want to attack is Jayson Tatum. And generally that went well. I thought that, Luka hit some tough shots, but overall, Doncic was able to get to his spots, was able to force help, and whether it was a pass or something else. Dallas turned to that a little bit less. There were some wrinkles that Boston went to make that a little less tenable for the Mavericks. But I wanted to bring up, because we don't always think about it in this context, Luka's just overall second half numbers: 3 of 8 from the field, 1 of 3 from 3, 3 of 5 or 2 of 5 from 2. 2 of 3 from the line. He missed, I believe that was when he missed that technical free throw. Did have 8 rebounds, did have 8 assists, but also had 5 turnovers during that time. And so Luka had this dominant stretch. And I've heard people say, like, oh, he got tired, or, oh, if he could do, if he could do what he did the first 15 minutes over the whole game. Well, yeah, sure. If you could make the whole plane out of that, then the Mavericks would be a really, really, really good team. But it's not only fatigue, it's also just, even for one of the best players on the planet, that sort of a diet is hard to maintain, both physically and just to maintain it at that level of success. Like, you're not going to score.
I mean, 20... just the odds of, like, you may have hit your first 4 one-legged step backs, but like you it's impossible to maintain that.
Yeah.
So like the number, you shoot enough of those, the numbers will catch up to you, even for someone like him. And we're not talking about like shots in the lane for him too. These are mostly like outside the paint even.
Correct. And when you look at his shot chart just for the second half, like it's you can kind of see part of this story where it's like, well, I mean, you could see it overall from the whole game as well. But for Luka, so in the second half, 1 shot in the restricted area, 0 shots in the upper paint, 4 mid-rangers. He's 1 of 4. That's going to happen. Sometimes you're going to go 6 of 7. Most people won't, but he went 6 of 7 on twos away from the basket in the first half, and then he went 1 for 4 on those in the second half. That as an overall distribution is very good for most guys, being over 50% on those shots, especially when you consider the difficulty he's generally being guarded by the other team's best defender, or at least one of their best defenders in this series. So yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing. And I've joked it's the law firm of Washington, Jones Jr., Green and Exum shooting a combined 2 for 12, I believe it was 2 for 12 in this game on 3-pointers. That is a challenge. And that 12 as a number is actually, you could argue, depending on the other team's coverage, a little bit low, but of course the 2 out of 12 is a lot worse. But then, yeah, 0 for 3 from Kyrie is a problem. And then another kind of thread on this is he was better later on, but that first stretch when Maxi Kleber was on the floor was absolutely brutal. The Celtics were not defending him. Kleber missed a couple threes. You could see the limitations with his AC joint there. He had a bad foul where he like jumped in a way that he could never have like gotten a block or a contest. He just like basically was a jump for a foul. And then he tried to drive on Porzingis, actually got, maybe like a half step on him. And then Porzingis just blocked his shot away. And so, yeah, Kleber, it ended up being that the Mavs actually outscored the Celtics in his minutes. They went to some Kleber at center minute. There was a brief stretch where they did that. But my hope that he could be a tactical wrinkle that would give Dallas something in case Gafford, one of my theories, which we'll go back to, that I was at least wrong on in game 2, that he would have real trouble in this series. In this game, to me, Kleber, what it showed me is that, yes, I hope he can improve physically over the course of these games. I don't think he's going to be a game breaker in the finals.
No, it doesn't seem that way. And there's the old thing, role players play better at home. I think as we talk about where the series is going,
not if they don't want to shoot because their shoulders fucked up.
Yeah. So let's get into some of the tactical wrinkles that we saw here. And Dallas broke this out. Particularly, they first did it when Kyrie was actually off the floor to have Luka off the ball more. I noticed, of course, that they had other guys besides Luka and Kyrie bringing the ball up. And, that Boston kind of realized that Boston continued, even off of misses, to really pressure in the backcourt. Even on Luka, they tried to just always have someone waiting basically at the opposite 3-point line, 70 feet from the basket or so, to just like prevent Luka from bringing the ball up quickly in transition. Like their transition defense has been really, really good again on anything but like the pick sixiest of turnovers, of which they have not had that many. So Dallas tried to get Luka off the ball more, and it actually worked great the first 2 times they tried it. They set a screen for him to get Pritchard onto him, so they switched the off-ball screen, and Luka gets the catch with a live dribble at the elbow against Pritchard. He's able to take one dribble and just shoot right over him, no problem. One of his easier looks of the night. Then they set a cross screen for Luka. He pops all the way out to the corner 3 and hits a corner 3. I think that's one of the few corners the Mavs, again, got totally outshot from corner 3s again, when you've got Luka, one of the best corner 3 generators of all time out there. And Boston immediately adapted to shut off that water. Now, one thing I had talked about on the live show that I thought of after we recorded the other day was set more screens with your center, or I'm sorry, with the guy who is
guarded by their center.
Yeah, exactly. Guarded by their center, to free your center up to then go set a screen against Luka or Kyrie, and then you can get your preferred matchup and run your conventional pick and roll, and also get your Jones Jr. into the corner, because we talked about in game one how the geometry of just having those guys have to set screens was not working very well, because they then had to be above the break and they weren't going to get guarded there in the corner. They're much more comfortable. We didn't see a ton of stuff like that. We did see more double screening actions. We saw off-ball screening actions to clear out a side so that the only remaining guy on a side was, say, Kristaps Porzingis, and they did actually get Derrick Jones Jr. an alley-oop dunk out of that kind of open side action against Porzingis when Tatum didn't really rotate as the low man. I thought Porzingis probably could have backed up a little bit more quickly, but he's not like a great out on the floor pick and roll defender in anything but a drop. So they tried to go to that. They got their matchups a little bit better than they did in game one, but nothing that was, in the end, particularly damaging for Boston. Boston started just not switching off ball screens and just having Jaylen Brown or whoever was on Luka just get through that screen. And Luka is not like, some unbelievable cutter necessarily. I joked on the live show that he got a backdoor, and you're like, it's getting desperate for Dallas when Luka is like cutting hard backdoor. That's not really what he wants to do.
There is one guy that he and the other Mavericks were able to take advantage of off ball on cuts, and that was Jaylen Brown. And it
did take great passes to do so on two of the three occasions.
But that is not the strength of Jaylen Brown's defensive game. He is not always the most attentive in those off-ball situations. It was funny. Like you did get a little bit of that. Like over the course of these playoffs, I've grown to understand better that not all the time, but Jayson Tatum can be worse in on-ball situations. There were some times where he was legit bad in the Pacers series as well. He had some rough moments in this one. Yeah. And then Jaylen Brown.
Luka was hunting him in the first quarter.
Yeah, exactly. And then Jaylen Brown, better on-ball, worse off-ball. And so you could just like, players have different attributes offensively. They have those defensively.
I thought Tatum got better defensively as the game went on too in those one-on-one situations. I think he started to kind of realize what was happening and like take the challenge.
Well, and while we're talking about Tatum, he doesn't have the dial quite right, but when he attacks early in the like advantage situations, those looked good. Then I thought they looked better. Missed some shots, but like there was some drive left on Lively that I thought like looked a lot better. And he had the 12 assists in this game. And so another tactical wrinkle, though, I brought up the off-ball cutting with Jaylen Brown. Daniel Gafford is not being guarded in most of these circumstances by the largest player on the floor for the Celtics because they're using somebody else. And you have to pick your spots with it a little bit, but Jason Kidd did a much better job getting the ball to Gafford when he had an advantage. So, I mean, you could say the easiest of those is a post up against a guard. Like, sure, if that's going to happen, you can make it work. And there were others where it was a little bit different than that. He also had a couple of offensive rebounds. And I thought it was a really nice use of what Daniel Gafford can do offensively. He doesn't have the most like robust. You're not going to give him the ball in triple threat position, but if he has an advantage, he has to attack really quickly. He can do reasonably well. And I thought Kidd could have gone to that more. I think if you go to it too much more than they did, then you're going to run into some diminishing returns. And there could be some diminishing returns in game 3 because I'm sure the Celtics assistant coaches saw this on film and they'll get some stuff for game 3. But it was something nice that Kidd got a couple of good buckets on as Gafford went 6 for 9 from the field.
Yeah, remember they gave Gafford what we thought was the Kendrick Perkins Ben Wallace memorial post up as the very first possession, and they actually had to double team him because he got right to the charge circle, and they set up a Derrick Jones Jr. 3. That's the only one that he's hit in this series. And yeah, Gafford posted up Tatum twice and like just a straight post up, throw it to him on the block, not even like a duck in or anything, and he scored on both of those. So I'm not gonna say run it until they stop it, but I'm like, yeah, let's do that twice a quarter. That could help it. Like just little enough that they don't really react to it. Cause like, you could always he's probably an opportunity double, right? Like if you really want to take it that seriously, you could probably just double team him there. And
he is neither the greatest passer nor the greatest free throw shooter.
Yeah, actually, quick aside here too. Well, actually, no, we'll save that. Porzingis, 23 minutes, didn't have the same offensive effect. He missed all 3 of his threes. He is kind of shooting it, like his legs don't look like perfect in terms of the way he's shooting it, but he did make all 4 of his twos, and I thought actually his shots were a little bit better. He would have probably played a little bit more. They could have gone to it more on post-ups too. Everyone else was going pretty well, so they didn't have to do that on those switches. And then, of course, though, with about whatever it was, 4 minutes left, I assume he would have closed the game if he could have. He goes out. Everything was going fine with Horford. They go up by 14, and the game was essentially over. I'm not sure what he did. They're very mum on it. They said he's going to get imaging tomorrow. Everyone's like, oh, he's fine. He's going to play. There was video of him kind of doing calf extensions with a band while he was sitting on the bench during the end of the game. So maybe it was something along the lines of like a little bit of a tweak on that left calf, or maybe even possibly a cramp. But it is kind of odd to me that there's been all these tweets out. It's like no one's actually saying what the injury was. He was, he said he's feeling good. He doesn't think it's anything serious, etc. So that's I guess we'll see on that. Any other players that you wanted to talk about here before we kind of I guess I had another actually strategic thing. So Boston had pretty good success with Luka as well by starting to get into more ghost screening action. Like Holiday had a nice drive off of that. They're trying to hide out Luka on him a lot. And so Holiday would just ghost out of the screen. Luka would just be a little bit behind him. Holiday could kind of catch it on what's almost more like an Iverson cut and just rip through without Luka in front of him. Like that way you can just take advantage of his slow lateral mobility without actually having to make a fake against him off the dribble. You can just rip through and go. So that was another little wrinkle that they brought out in this one to just cause a little more miscommunication. Dallas, they went to actually a couple of Spain pick and rolls that looked pretty good. One of them was down the end. I think, more of that because they just don't Luka's a great passer, but they don't run anything that really causes any communication problems or really are going to get you a system bucket. So I think they should try more of that stuff, but that's not in their DNA, right? I think that's something that's important to consider.
Part of the story of game 1 was that Jaden Hardy didn't really have a place, and he only played 2 minutes in game 2. He hilariously checked in for the final 0.1 in the first quarter, which I don't quite understand. And then he did end up playing, I think it was 2 or 3 minutes overall. And so he was barely in. And then the Celtics were actively not guarding Josh Green in half court. There was one play where the Jason Kidd called a timeout and Josh Green was standing in the corner open. I'm like, yeah, I kind of do get that. And so he was 0 for 3 on threes. Could easily make one of those or whatever else, but so much there. And then Green is a capable defender, but this is a bad series for him defensively because the Celtics' best offensive players are too big for him. And maybe he could do some stuff on Derrick White, but there's not a lot of value there. I would like to see Kidd, and he, to his credit, did this more in game 2. Turn to Dante Exum. Exum can compete defensively. He can give you some transition boosts, and he can sometimes hit shots. I mean, I would trust him more in that respect than Josh Green overall, even though Exum had some trouble in the limited minutes he played shooting in the series. So lean more that direction. Of course, that is exactly one player off their bench that I even sort of trust other than Derek Lively. And you're going to have to probably get one more, whether that's leaning on somebody like Exum or Green or trying out Hardaway, but nobody else. It's not going to be Omax. It's not going to be Markieff Morris in all likelihood. It's not going to be AJ Lawson. So the play better adjustment for the role players is kind of there, but they're limited. And the Celtics playing 8 guys who none of them are bad. All of them are good basketball players at minimum. It stresses you out in a different way than any other team in the NBA.
Yeah, it really does. And they didn't get anything off their bench other than Porzingis in this one, or Peyton Pritchard, who apparently Jaylen Brown said he checked himself into the game for that.
Amazing.
For that shot, because he works on those all the time. That's fascinating that he wouldn't normally have come in, but with 3 seconds left and Dallas shooting free throws, he checked himself in. They threw it to him, and he hit a pretty tough shot. He had to forearm the guy out of the way and to shoot that 40-foot banker. Yeah, adjustment wise here now. I want to start by diagnosing the problem a little bit more for Dallas. And I think Dallas looked at the film of game one and they came out with a few things. Obviously, Luka and Kyrie being more aggressive early. That looked good early on. They weren't quite able to sustain that because Boston just brought ever more help. And the other thing was, hey, you role players, like you're open, like you guys got to be more aggressive. And I thought Kleba, you referenced his stretch earlier. I thought, like, we've seen this before with some other teams that have non-shooters, like Draymond Green, for example. Sometimes, like, if the Warriors are struggling offensively in the series, he'll come and be like, all right, I'm just going to shoot it now. It's like, yeah, you could be more like, but you're not going to make them respect you based on who you are. And once you start to get outside of what your DNA is as a player, what you've been doing all season, all career, what your teammates expect you to do, where you're like, okay, we need you to take that shot. Like Kleba took a bunch of bad shots, and yeah, his shoulder didn't look good. His shot was flat. And then the other thing that I would point to is it's just like these guys are not great shooters. And it's not just that, okay, like if this guy gets his shot off, we expect him to shoot X percentage. Part of the reason why guys don't shoot as many is they just don't get their shot. That's not what they're looking to do. They're looking to maybe drive. Their shot prep isn't that fast. They're just not a natural shooter, right? So there are two plays that really stuck out to me on this. Because part of the reason why you leave a guy open to give help is it's not necessarily, oh yeah, we're fine with this guy shooting wide open. Maybe if the pass is perfect, he'll shoot it and he'll get an open one, and then we'll see whether he makes it or misses it. But a big part of that calculation is if we leave this guy, particularly with some of the players that Boston has, we can close you down. Like, even if you're open when the pass is made, we're going to actually be able to close out to you. We'll force you to drive and make a decision, or you're not going to make the right read on the closeout, and then you'll kind of double pump and psych yourself out, or maybe the pass will be a little bit low. You're not good at shooting off of low passes. And so there's one play like that where Holiday helps all the way into the lane off of Jones Jr., and the pass goes to Jones Jr. pretty much right in his shooting pocket, but for whatever reason, he decides, it doesn't feel perfect to me. I'm open, so I'm just going to take a dribble and reset. But he didn't move his feet at all to reset. And Jrue Holiday saw him do that, and he had closed him down by the time that dribble was back in his hands. And then there's another one where Exum is open in the corner, but the pass is kind of, down by his knees, and the closeout is kind of coming. So he's like, you know what? Maybe this isn't the greatest one for me. I'll just kind of keep it moving here. And so that's how you end up with so few attempts by these guys. They might make a few more than they did, but that's how you end up there, is because they're not looking to just like catch the ball and get it out of their hands immediately. That's not the number one thing that they do.
And it makes sense because what makes the best of the best, the Lukas, the Steph Currys, the LeBrons of the world, so valuable is that you can get more out of limited offensive players, but there's still limited offensive players. And we praised Derrick Jones Jr. in the prior two rounds for doing better on closeouts, but it's still an imperfect picture. And I thought that PJ Washington did a nice job overall inside the arc. He got some floaters, got some bigs overall. And him scoring.
Yeah, I don't think he's the problem.
No, I don't either. But it's not enough, unless he's shooting incredibly well, like he has at other moments in these playoffs to do it. But the overall threshold that you need from Washington, from Jones, from Green, Exum, whoever the hell else you're going to try in that other spot, it's a lot to ask. And Irving playing better would be a nice way to do it. But we've talked about why life is really hard for him in this series because of the players that Boston can put on him. So it's hard. And I still believe that Dallas, they can and will, can more than will win games in this series. And they shot 5 of 11 from the free throw line in the first half, getting a couple of those points back. Maybe this is closer throughout. Maybe then we get to the vaunted crunch time minutes of this. And yes, it's notable that there was a point when this game got a little bit tight towards the end. But part of the reason it did, and you brought this up really well on the live show, is that Boston really started taking the air out. Their goal was to run the full shot clock every possession, ideally not get beaten transition defense, and they gave up a couple of quick buckets. But even with all of that, there was, I believe, it was a 9-0 run because Luka got an and one that cut it to 5.
It was a 9-0 run in 4 possessions, but they ran the clock down and didn't turn it over on each one of their 3 possessions in that stint.
Yes, and so that ran from roughly the 3:34 mark until the 1:15 mark. So you cut the margin, but you still need to basically be perfect from that point. And the Mavs did get a stop on that next play, and then the ensuing run out is what led to what was the Derrick White, Jaylen Brown double block. And so they needed
might have been a push in the back from Jaylen Brown, but also it was a pretty good play by those guys.
Mm-hmm. And so at that point, eventually Jaylen Brown gets a layup after they run the clock down again, and the game is over. And so it was close in the sense that a few things going differently could have gone there, but Boston wasn't actively threatened. We haven't gotten what I would consider true crunch time yet in this series. We very well could. And so, yes, Dallas, they were elements that they did better. They were actually a more efficient first shot half court offense in this game than the Celtics were. But a couple other things. One, Dallas had a 60 transition offensive rating. It's something we always watch for when a team has an anomalously low or high number there. And Boston had a 216 offensive rating off of their 10 steals. So yeah, there's that. But those things that Dallas can improve upon are fair. Boston shooting 10 of 39 from 3, including a Hauser 0 for 5, Porzingis 0 for 3, though one of his threes was really ambitious. Just no time, everything else like that. Dallas can win games, but it's just ignoring the 2 that they already have locked in the book. I think it's advantage Boston. If it's equal health, if it's health as we expect it, it's advantage Boston in every individual game, even if it's not a 75-25% chance.
Yeah, I think it should not be lost that this was a blowout in a close game's clothing in a number of ways, not the least of which was that Boston went to the prevent offense and prevent defense too, by the way. They did not want to give up a 3. Joe Mazzulla is very analytically focused, and particularly, we saw him do that intentional foul up 6, remember, just to make sure they didn't get a 3. So he's kind of more, he wants to force the other team to take the quick 2, that's essentially, and just play it out. And you saw, I didn't think that their shots were all horrible in that period where they were taking the air out of the ball, but just the math is so in their favor that it ended up not being close in the end. Maybe it was they could have got back within 1 possession. The Celtics still would have had the ball with, under a minute to go, up 3, with things having gotten literally as bad as they could have gotten. Yes, you're taking a larger chance of them scoring on every possession, but it's still 2s. To say, we're up, they're going to make 7 2-pointers and we're not going to score at all, and we're going to run the time down by 24 seconds every time we have the ball up 14. I don't know what I think of that strategy, because it's just hey, guys, if we just keep scoring our normal amount, they can't come back on us either. So I don't know how much that's actually warranted. That's maybe something for the analytics guys. You just got to basically do the math on how much worse your offense and defense are overall when you're indexed on
versus
taking away the 3-point line so much. Yeah.
2 remaining possessions or something out of the game.
Yeah. So, another thing that was crazy is just how little anybody ran off anybody's misses. Maybe there's something weird about the timing of the logging at Boston's arena, but this has Boston running on 9.7% of Dallas misses and Dallas running on 8.8% of Boston misses. And also, according to this, Dallas did not score a single point in transition off of a Boston miss. That is, these are 2 amazing transition defenses, but that's insane. And I think we talked about this in the preview. I think one thing that's kind of held true was that Boston was very prepared for transition after going up against the Pacers, who are on a complete other level from Dallas. So these your cute little hit-ahead passes to Kyrie Irving. Nah, I think we're ready That's okay. Also want to say something about Jayson Tatum too, because he's had a couple of rough offensive games, 6 of 16, 6 of 22 in this one. He has been, I think, pretty darn good as a passer. He's taken a few bad shots, but it should be noted that like he's a small forward by trade. That's what we have in our position rankings. Basically, these entire playoffs, he's guarded the opposing team's center. That is like truly sacrificing to win. Small forwards don't want to do that. LeBron James was 270 in his prime. He didn't even want to play power forward.
Anthony Davis.
Much less play center. Yeah, Anthony, like nobody wants to guard at a center. Nobody wants to have to box out Daniel Gafford on every play. He's also a very good rebounder. And, you know, the way it's trending, he's probably, and if they win, he's unlikely to be finals MVP. And he wasn't, of course, in the East, but he was guarding Miles Turner all the time. And so that is really sacrificing to win. Like this guy is probably going to get shit on for people who don't know what they're talking about. Oh, he's not, you know, maybe his legs are dead on his jumper or whatever, but he still is obviously like penetrating enough to have 12 assists in this game. So he still is a pretty high usage, but like there are not a lot of true small forwards, much less superstars who are willingly going to just guard the other team's center and deal with that. And credit to him, credit to Joe Mazzulla and Ime Udoka before him to get him to do that and for him to take on that role. And I think it's something that isn't talked about enough, even if, you know, we're not talking about him as like a top 5 player in the NBA and all this shit, but like he does really care about winning and he does a lot of things that do contribute to winning that just he's not going to get credit for from the masses. So I want to give it to him here at least.
Absolutely.
Adjustments player-wise for Dallas. I mean, Boston's going to do what they do, I assume. Porzingis with this injury is going to still come off the bench as he did in this one. So I don't think they're going to do much differently. Why should they?
No, they don't really have to.
Player-wise, at least.
And Dallas, I mean, I brought up the potentially running some Spain stuff. They did it once, and it worked. It worked okay. And the off-ball stuff with Luka, I think, was compelling. Gafford, screener. I don't know that there's too much else there. Player usage. I mean, they did give XM 11 minutes. I was happy about that. The Hardy was marginalized. And there isn't. I mean, if you're gonna play less Moxie Kleba, it's gonna have to come from somewhere. And I mean, who knows? Maybe you go to the second worst defender theory with Tim Hardaway Jr. and you just see if it's gonna work. But
yeah, I was thinking about that.
You could. That's a possibility. Playing Kleba, you know, getting some of those better defensive lineups where he's at the 4, you know, every so often. But I don't see any, like, it's so funny when you consider other points in Jason Kidd's coaching career. I don't see any super low hanging fruit for him to really clean up. There are ways they can be better, and even the play better adjustment, the role players at home stuff. But I'm not seeing anything big.
Do you think they have a better chance of, because they're kind of pretty much going with their best possible defensive groups right now, not including Hardaway. You know, we'll see about XM too, but like, I mean, I guess they did go 5 out with Kleba. Maybe they'll be seduced by that because they scored so well. But like I said, I didn't think that was representative. I think that was mostly Boston just committing to give them 2s, which they were taking, and they really went away from the amount of help they were giving earlier in the game in that last 3.5 minute stretch when Boston was up 14. So they may try to go Kleba more 5 out. I think they were guarding Maxi Kleba because they're like, we're not giving up a 3 to anybody, not because they suddenly respect Maxi Kleba. So I don't think that would work all that well, and I don't like them being small and not having any rim protection either. But I predict that's what we're going to see more of because I think they're just going to get seduced by that. I think that's a bit of a canard. You know, Exum did play 11 minutes in this one. He was +4. Hopefully they will look for him a little bit more. And I do like he is a better shooter than Josh Green, and he is a better shooter than Derrick Jones Jr. I know Jason Kidd doesn't think that anymore because he missed his first 6 threes or the fuck it is the playoffs, right? Like who's been good for you all year, and you went away from him just because he missed, like, you know, he didn't shoot well enough on his first 10 3-pointers. Like he still is probably a more aggressive 3-point shooter than at least Green and maybe Jones too, and certainly a more accurate one than both. And I also think he gives them a little bit more pace. He did have one kind of wild turnover because you could tell Dallas really wanted to push the pace and it just like didn't work, and then they ran out of energy. But he was kind of out there to do that. And I think defensively, like I think he can be fine. Like Jones Jr. in the series to me has not been amazing as a one-on-one defender anyway.
No.
So I would probably even consider cutting Jones Jr.'s minutes, giving a little more Exum. And Exum at least can drive, he can kick, he can push the ball up, he can bring the ball up as well. You can run some more sets. Like there's a reason that the groups with him, Kyrie, and Luka were very good throughout the season. So I would look at that more. He just gives them more ball movement, another decision maker as well to just get more passes. That was, of course, such a big theme that they had barely over 200 passes in the first game. Like he could help them some with like those quick hitters. So I would go more him first. I would consider Hardaway Jr. because I do think there's just more of a chance of improving the offense than the defense. The second worst defender theory of like, okay, you can only go after one guy, that is maybe less salient against Boston than any other team because Boston is so into the driving kicks. They have guys who can make decisions on every spot. Hardaway Jr. is terrible at closeouts. He's probably worse as an off-ball defender than an on-ball defender. So he could, even if you're not like quote unquote going after him, which I don't think they should go after Luka to tire him out every play. But him being on the backside, him having to close out, like Boston could take advantage of that more than maybe anybody else. But I would look into it especially if the offense is still struggling, early second quarter or something like that. I don't think Hardy is the answer necessarily either. Lively struggled again, -15. Had one field goal. They were a little better on the offensive glass,
which was a nice dunk on Derrick White, but
yeah. Well, there was the other play. You remember the White block of the dunk that turned out to be a goaltend because he like barely had his thumb in the front of the. That was an incredible play. So yeah, I don't know. And then as far as going after Luka, I think they could try a little bit something different there. There's a couple of theories I have. One is you could kind of have Luka in like, not necessarily like a pure drop, but kind of more of like a catch coverage where, because what they're doing, particularly Tatum, is he's like backing up, getting ahead of steam at Luka, and then Luka changing direction or speed is what he can't deal with. The Warriors were kind of one of the first to do this, but it's more basically just like a designed late switch where you say back off enough that the guy has to kind of turn the corner. We're going to play a conventional, like make it kind of seem like it's a conventional pick and roll defense on him. The guy's going to stay attached to him who's on him initially getting over the screen. Luka will be kind of waiting inside the arc in like what looks like a sort of drop-ish coverage. And then as soon as the guy steps inside the arc, then you late switch it. Let Luka pick the guy up with more space. He'll kind of be waiting for him at the foul line. All right, you want to take that long two over Luka? Go for it. And then, all right, if you want to back up behind the three-point line again and then try to go at Luka, that's fine. But that's a way to sort of like waste time. Maybe they don't recognize exactly what it is. That would be one thing. Another thing would be then if Luka does get beat, as soon as his man gets beat inside the arc, you're going to help off the next pass, and Luka is then going to then peel switch onto that pass. So you have a few more ways to kind of deal with Luka other than just we're going to let these guys do 6 moves against Luka Doncic and tire him out and make him slide his feet as fast as possible, and then we're also not really going to help that much. So I think that's some things I would try to consider with him. And Kyrie can also just be better defensively when he's not in foul trouble too. Hit some questions?
Sure.
What do we got here? The problem with Exum, he's trash against the Clippers, OKC, and Wolves kid benched him because they've been no-shows all the playoffs. I mean, I don't think he was like, all right, he wasn't great, but he was playing like 6 minutes. I mean, that's just, it's when a guy's been good and like they were winning, so that's fine. But when a guy's been good all year, I don't think that's 6 minutes is enough time to conclude that he's not going to be effective. And also, like Jones Jr., if you look at how much he was playing in the regular season, like he didn't play that much, right? Like I think Jones Jr. was very good against Edwards, and he was very good against Paul George, and he was very good against Shea. And so they felt like they need, but Jones Jr. actually hasn't been that good in this series defensively. He's gotten beaten a few times by some of these bigger guys, and his shooting is killing them. So I think, I don't know that you need to play Jones Jr. 32 minutes. I think you can give a few of his minutes
I
to
mean,
Exum and not get too big of a downgrade on defense.
Dante Exum played 26 minutes total in the Oklahoma City series. He played, I think it was like 20 or something like that in the Wolves series. It's hard to say that somebody's terrible if that's all you're giving them. You know, you're not giving them the opportunity to play terribly. Maybe you can argue that he would have, and he played a little bit more in the Clippers series. But again, like Exum, his value is more than just whether he makes that one or two open threes in his 10 minutes or not. He can provide some pace. He can do all these other things. And so, and we're not comparing him to perfect options. We're comparing him to imperfect options.
Dre says Tatum's facing the same defense that Edwards getting against Dallas. It's not easy. Boston is deeper, and also just they have more shooting, right? Like, I think if you would just put Anthony Edwards on this Boston team instead of Tatum, he would probably be doing better offensively than Tatum is doing the series, because of just the amount of spacing that they have. But I think Tatum can play a lot better too. Like, he smoked some layups. I think he just needs to go up a little bit stronger, get fouled on some of these. And I think he will have better games in the series. I didn't hate his looks generally in this. And yeah, like I said, there's probably 4 or 5, like the 2 steps back against Lively without trying to drive by him were terrible. And then he took one with like, maybe 4 minutes left or so, maybe 6 minutes left. That was just like, he had a guy wide open in the corner. It was Jrue, the center. Klebo was like standing under the basket, not guarding Jrue. And he just took a contested jumper because he couldn't get all the way to the rim, because the guy was there, and he wasn't like, oh, why can't I get all the way to the room? Oh, yeah, the opposite corner is wide open. But largely, he did a pretty good job passing.
Tats mentioned this is why the Raptors got Marc Gasol, because Dallas's bigs can't playmaker, be an offensive hub. I don't think, and brings up the idea of PJ Washington doing that. I don't think PJ Washington has that in his game. He's been better inside the arc, but as a playmaker, I mean, we saw him, though there was a play where he had the pass open and nearly traveled because he wasn't sure if he wanted to make the pass and ended up getting it. Like, that's just, PJ Washington has been better as a Maverick than I expected, and he's been better on both ends of the floor. That's not his game.
Yeah, they could do some specials. Like, there are times when he's being guarded by Peyton Pritchard. Like, you should be able to get the ball to the elbow and just like fake like he's gonna set a screen and then like duck him in or something while you run the screen for Luka and Kyrie as a dummy action, and then like Washington's able to duck in. Do that 4 times a game. Like, there are a lot of things you could do, and we've been going back to that the rise of the Warriors, that 2018 Warriors Rockets series, of just like, how do you beat a switching defense? But like, Dallas doesn't have that in their DNA, because Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving just beating their man is how you beat a switching defense. And they haven't gone up against anyone who has like this sort of depth of quality on the perimeter. Let's see. Boston is hokey 73-73. Boston making Luka work on the defensive end is sapping his second half energy. It shows in 2 games. There's nowhere to hide him. The formula, we had another comment about how the formula for Dallas is Luka scoring 20 in the first 13 minutes of the game, but he doesn't have the conditioning to continue that throughout. Part of that I think could be the knee too, right? Like, he just, this regular season, he averaged 35, right? Like, how many 35-point games does he have in the playoffs? Like, not many. I don't think he's even, maybe he has one 40-point game, I want to say. But I think that's right to some degree. It is more reminiscent, particularly with Kyrie struggling, of what it looked like in those Clippers series for Luka. Not that he's ever been as dominant as he was early on in the games in those Clippers series, the ones from 20 and 21. But he would run out of gas in some of those fourth quarters down the end. And, I think that's naturally what's happening here.
Luka has broken 35 or more twice, game 5 of the Clippers series and game 5 of the Wolves series. And then he's been in the 30s a bunch of times. And it's also, like, I brought this up earlier, you wouldn't expect Doncic to make all of the shots he was taking in the first 15 minutes of this game, even if he was 100% stamina, could keep the stamina bar at 100. They're just hard shots to make, even for him.
Let's talk a little bit about the Lakers situation. And you and I have a rule we've mentioned on here. We talk about it even more when we're planning out what we're going to discuss on the show about coaching hires. Would you care to regale the people about what that is?
The rule is we never talk about a coaching hire until the hire is announced in a way that we consider like done.
Yeah.
We talked about the JJ Redick hire as impending, and it
Why
could
did we
still
break
happen.
the rule? Just because it seemed like it was there was a report that was pretty close, and also there's sort of like a logical reason why it hadn't
There was
actually been announced
because
yet.
Redick is broadcasting the finals, and we hadn't really heard about any serious other candidates. And then now there is the reporting mostly from Woj, who of course has deep connections. Not that I'm criticizing him for this, to the Hurley family. That
Well, he also has deep connections to Reddick and CAA too. So,
well, no, I mean just because he wrote a
yeah,
book on Dan Hurley's dad. Um,
yeah,
and
that's right.
so
Yeah, I mean that seems like what it is. Like Northeast New Jersey, like high school and college
yep.
coaches. That might be the one thing that Woj has more loyalty to than CAA itself.
And St.
At this
Bonaventure.
point.
And so basically Dan Hurley is now a firm candidate in this. It seems like it's Hurley's decision whether he will take the Lakers job or UConn. That decision will happen before the next time you and I record a podcast. So we're only going to talk about this incentive. And so I will, here's what I will say. I obviously don't watch college nearly as much as I used to. I enjoy watching UConn's film more than basically any other college team I watch. It does appear that LeBron James, who is not necessarily a Laker for next year, does respect Dan Hurley as a coach. And so he is the type of college coach that I would be interested in getting an NBA job. I like Brad Stevens, for example, his Butler stuff when he got hired by the Celtics. So this is the kind of hire that I would make if I were getting a college guy. Whether it's going to work out, we'll have to see. Whether he actually takes the job, we'll have to see.
Yeah, and it does seem to like there are definitely angles here, right? And I'm usually I can tell what they are in terms of like how the reporting is being slanted and why certain stuff comes out. I regret to inform you I don't quite have my great theory nailed down on this yet of like, is this all a smokescreen and they just don't want Reddick's his whole thing to be a distraction for ESPN during the finals, and hey, by the way, you can also get Dan Hurley more money as well, but he's never actually taken the job. I mean, it does seem like UConn, I don't know how high they can go. Like the Lakers, are they going to go 13 million a year or something, double his UConn salary at 6? We'll see. But again, there's definitely some weirdness in how all this has been reported, and this has been going on for a month, but it never came out until just now. I mean, Woj probably knew about it, but didn't want it to come out. But now it's very convenient that it comes out because at a minimum, Hurley can get more money from UConn, and also take some heat off of JJ as well, right? Yeah. So like, and ESPN. So it's like, I don't know. We'll once we see what actually does happen, then maybe we'll.
So Nate, I don't want to dwell on this, but the question I want to ask you is: do you think the Lakers' job is a good job? Let's focus less on the money of it, but like, so for me, I want to pose it to you before I put in my theory on this.
It is a good job for Dan Hurley because to get him, they have to pay, which they really never have for coaches other than Phil Jackson. And even they didn't exactly pay through the nose for him. That was blood from a stone for him because he also wasn't a GM. Although maybe I'm conflating that with the Bulls too. But in any event, I think it's a good job for him for a couple reasons. Like, one, it's just like he's been to the mountaintop in college basketball. Not a lot more to prove there. Being with LeBron James, the Lakers, getting paid a ton. And for him, it's actually much less risky for him to take this job than for basically anyone else. Because even though it has just chewed up coaches left and right. Because he can always just go back to college. Is he going to not have a $6 million contract from somebody waiting for him in college if he flames out in the NBA? No, of course not. Like he can pick whatever job he wants in college as soon as he goes back. Like this is the beauty of going to the pros. If you're a college coach, it never hurts you, your reputation as a college coach. And obviously to go to the pros to begin with, you have to have a great reputation as a college coach. So I think for him, it's a totally fine job, and you get to coach the greatest player of all time. And yeah, you know what? Like, and you're gonna have a big enough contract, and they want you there for the long term that like maybe you hilariously more than anyone except maybe Eric Spoelstra, who's coached LeBron, and probably not even him, can like be like, hey, you know what? Like LeBron, you got to listen to me here. And maybe he can have success, but he also is just like a huge competitor. So I think for him, yes. For most coaches, especially with what they pay these dudes, as a first-time head coach, if I had other options, I would probably be more interested in those options. So sorry that was such a long answer, but what was your answer?
Well, it's a good answer, but I was focused more on kind of the talent perspective. And we did the Lakers offseason preview recently, and there are pathways for them to add some real talent, especially if players are interested in going there. But broadly speaking, this is an older roster. They don't really have a post LeBron plan other than, hey, we'll get another great player to come here. But for me, the bigger reasons long term, short term, like, yeah, I mean, especially while LeBron James is LeBron James, it's a tantalizing job. The Lakers have been poorly owned and poorly run for a long time now. And that would be significantly more apparent if LeBron James hadn't chosen to go there, despite them being poorly owned and poorly run over this time. Like the Lakers would have been mostly an afterthought, I think, for the last decade. If that hadn't been the case, they did have some intriguing young core, and maybe that would have worked out if they hadn't done the AD trade and everything else. But my instinct is no, that wouldn't have gone.
I mean,
that
they
way.
probably would have been making some playoffs.
Yeah, like well,
they would have got some other free agent to go there. But you're saying if they weren't the Lakers,
exactly?
And they did. They do a pretty good job of scouting and finding guys, I would say, overall. So,
I think they're a little overrated in that respect. They're more Hood Shafinos and Taylor Horton Tuckers than sometimes we forget about. There are more of those guys.
I mean, those are like the only two bad ones. That and what was the guy from Stanford they drafted 34? Like
Christie and Lewis will have to see. I think there are more of them. And
all right, well, let me give you their list of successes that are low draft picks. All right. Kuzma was excellent for 27, no matter what you think of him now. Caruso, they pulled out of nowhere. That guy was awesome.
Reeves.
Yeah, Reeves is totally out of nowhere as well. Like that's a really good one. Who else? I mean, they got some like free agent guys too. But like, Malik Monk, for example, if they were in a different spot, they probably could have just re-signed him if they weren't like totally capped out. Zubats was a really good find in the second round. So that's basically like one guy a year, like one. But are you gonna
argue that the Lakers are anything other than poorly run overall? Like they've done that well, but if we're talking about it, comparing it to like a player's
Nance
attributes,
is another good one, by the way.
But like relatively,
but especially, I mean, some of their problems are also born of being the Lakers, right? Like it's like Russell Westbrook wanted to go there. We see the big shiny object. We're gonna bring him in, right? Like, and so if they were just like, oh, we can't get free agents, then they would just be building through the draft. And that would actually be a much more useful attribute than it's been when they just decide to let Alex Caruso go because we got to trade for Russell Westbrook.
Yeah. Anyway, so my theory is that the Lakers, and yes, they will always be in the mix for high level players if they have the capacity to bring them in. And that is important to acknowledge. They won't always necessarily be like LeBron, where it's kind of like, damn the torpedoes, I'm going to go no matter what. But it can absolutely happen. It probably will in the future. I mean, years ago, I did a Reddit AMA where somebody asked me the team that did make the playoffs that year that was most likely to win the championship next. And I said the Lakers, who ended up being the team that did it. Because it's just they always pull a rabbit out of a hat. But generally speaking, when you're poorly owned and poorly run and poorly managed, I think that those bear out. They're not as egregious as some of the other teams. But so that means that having the Lakers job for the next 6 years might not be great, but you also might not be having it for the next 6 years. And for Hurley, I love your point, and I would have said the same thing, that no matter how this goes, maybe if it goes like beeline level terrible, you're still going to get a great college job after. It might even be in Connecticut, might be somewhere else. If it could be the Northeast, if you want, it could be wherever in the country you want it to be. And so the downside for Hurley is low. And so it's a job worth considering. And then the other part is like, do I think that like it'd be more fun to coach the Oklahoma City Thunder over the next 3 years? Sure. That job's not available. And those most tantalizing young core groups, like maybe if Pop retires and that one gets open, but who in the world knows what's going to happen with that succession plan?
You see this comment that just got posted?
Yeah, after
Lakers talk in the finals. Is this ESPN?
I mean,
hey, fuck off! We talked about the game for an hour.
Yeah, we talked about the game for like what 15 ESPN halftimes worth of time before we
no, like 30 ESPN halftimes worth. Oh man. But yeah, I mean the pressure that you get in this job is definitely a lot. But I don't even know that, like, I don't think Darvin Ham or even Frank Vogel necessarily like got fired because of results. I think they got fired because they weren't connecting with the roster. Now, I think it's not necessarily like pressure and like crazy expectations. Yeah, it's not crazy expectations from like ownership or anything. I don't think they want to like get rid of these guys. I think it's more LeBron James and maybe Anthony Davis just, kind of tuning guys out to some degree, or maybe Darvin Ham just didn't do a good job. Like you have a better knowledge behind the scenes to know that than and there's been plenty of reporting on why they fired him. Like I don't think it was like so fucking unjust they fired.
But there's also, I mean, it's interesting that the one of the times from, again, we're doing this off of second and third hand sourcing, that LeBron James agitation didn't work to get the coach fired was because the Heat, who have strong management and strong ownership, just said no. And Spoelstra, like, that worked out. Like I mean,
LeBron has never been involved in any kind of coaching decision in his life. Like anytime, all 15 times that his team has had a coaching vacancy, it's been reported that he has no involvement whatsoever. All right, we got to get going here. This is it is a fun discussion, but we're breaking our rule again of not discussing a coaching situation before the guy actually gets hired. So, all right, we'll catch y'all next time. Thanks so much for joining. And don't forget about that free trial on Dunked On Prime as well. Never a better time to be on there than that. Till next time.